Pat?
I think she did. Pat, did you? Oh,
No?
oh, okay. I was thinking that
We did?
he'll sign it after.
Oh, we're cooks.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you for your patience. We're running a few minutes late. People are still coming in, so if you haven't had a chance to grab a cup of coffee, some homemade oatmeal treats by the Stevens family, coffee from Rooster Brothers. Please help yourself. Thank everybody for coming today. It's really always fun for us to have events like this. Again, a special thank you today to Rooster Brothers for providing our coffee and the Stevens family for providing the treats. I'm going to introduce to you Kathy Surry, who is Mr. Stevens' daughter. And
I got to become Mr. Stevens all of a sudden, but I'm bald.
and he's going to run his own show.
I don't owe her a penny. I don't have to pay her anything, so. Anyway.
So, Kathy, if you would like to start, we'd appreciate that.
Well, I think some of you here have already read the book, maybe seen it in the introduction. I explained that a few years ago, I for a long time I thought about writing a children's book, and I wanted to write about somebody growing up in Maine in simpler times. So I started asking my dad, well, tell me some of your stories. And of course I knew some stories growing up. He talked a lot about the oatmeal. Every time we had oatmeal, he said, I don't want any of that oatmeal. I had to eat that for days. So we knew about that. I knew that he slept in the attic and the snow would come in sometimes on them. And they had to sleep on an old mattress with coats on them for warmth. And sometimes I went to school with no lunch. So I knew those kind of things. And in the 60s, when I was growing up, my grandparents still had no indoor bathroom and still had the pump at the sink. So, and I knew they were crude people. So those things I knew. But he started sending me.
Well, you knew that. So glad you told me and them too.
This lady grew up on the neck too. So anyway, he started emailing me stories, and the more I read, and sometimes I laughed, sometimes I felt like crying, and I thought, wow, this is not stuff that I could put in a children's book, but these stories should be told. So I kept thinking about a way to do it and decided they had to be in his voice. And so I just started collecting information. Sometimes I'd write him back and say, well, what do you mean it was a terrible summer? What do you mean by that? And what did this mean? And tell me more about this person. So ended up, I had so much material. At one point, I think I had 10 pages just on the subject of deer hunting and deer meat. So it was a bit of a challenge trying to figure out how to organize it in a way that other people would find entertaining and interesting. So I never had the intention of publishing it ourselves. He mentioned that at the time, and I thought, I don't want to do that. But Amazon and Create Space, I started doing some research about that and decided, well, this would be a great way to get it out to friends and family. But just in the past few months, we've sold over 1,000 copies on Kindle. So that was very exciting. And in the early part of it, I was sharing stories with people. I would sometimes give them to people who didn't know him and say, as a test market kind of, well, what do you think of this story? And they'd say, these are amazing. These are great stories. You should publish these. So that's kind of how it started. And so we're here today, and we really appreciate Sandy organizing this for us. So, some friends and people who are interested here. I'll turn it over to my dad, Robert, and he's going to read a few excerpts from the book, and maybe, and then we'll answer some questions.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming. The library especially, and I don't know where Sandy went. I want to really thank her. She was really instrumental in getting this together, but also instrumental in hooking me up with WEIU, who gave me very nice time and questions to answer, and then the Ellsworth American. And that fellow, Steve, did a wonderful job and gave me a lot of time, and I just think both cases were pretty nice. But I appreciate all you coming, both of us do. And I don't think I could get this many at my funeral. Well, I don't expect I'm ever going to know, am I? Kathy and my granddaughter Amanda have picked out some things for me to read. Because last time I read some things, I picked out the emotional stuff, and it's easier to write than it is to read it. So I'm just going to read a few things that they picked out and that I think is kind of fun, and there's some things. So I'll read this and then turn to another one. And this is part of what we call the old homestead. It said there was never any indoor plumbing or running water. My father told me once that if I dug a trench from the well to the house, he would put a hand pump in and make it easier to have water. I must have been only 13 or 14. I dug a trench like he wanted with a pickaxe and shovel across the driveway to the house. The digging was as hard as you might expect, with the driveway packed down from years of travel. All summer long, the trench stayed open, with us all jumping over it and driving as close as possible. Finally, in the fall, it was filled back in, and there was no pump in the sink until years later. My father did not really want it. Did not want an inside bathroom either. As he said, the old lady will use more water, and the well won't take it. If we used too much water, someone had to go to the well and get more. It was just an old hand-dug affair about 10 or 12 feet deep. At any time, it could have been dug deeper with a backhoe tractor. In the winter, the well top would be ice-covered. Sometimes there was not even a proper cover at all. So a person could easily slip and fall into the well. Only about 12 feet deep, but head first, and that would be the end of it. We had a small wood stove that would go out soon as we went to bed, and that was usually quite early. Remember, we had no radio or television in the early days. In fact, there was not even electricity on our roads, so we only had kerosene lights. We were almost always out of oil for the lamps. The wicks would not reach the oil, so we would put water in the lamps so that the oil would rise to the top and reach the wicks. This would only work for a while, and the fire would just burn the wicks and smoke. There were just bare studs in the house, no insulation. Nobody used it then. Tommy and I slept on a mattress in the attic, really just a crawl space, and our bedding consisted of the old coats men used to wear, long and usually wool. Once you got them on top of you, you could not move around a lot because they would fall off. You didn't want to leave your arms out because they would get very cold in that house. There was a trap door above the heating stove, about 2 by 2 feet. We would climb up the ladder that was nailed to the wall, and that was where we slept. Probably was a hazard. Any fire we would have had trouble. The roof above our heads was so low that we could not stand up in the center, and when in bed, we could not set up because the roofing nails came through and stuck down, and you could hit your head on it. To get dressed, you would have to kick your pants on and then get on your knees to buckle up. Then you would go down a hole in the ceiling and down the wall. When the stove was not running, I could step on it and get down. When the stove was running, it got very hot, and I would have to swing over out of the way and step down on loosely piled wood. I want to read you any more of that one. This one's entitled, and this, I'm not reading the whole story, but this one's called The Oatmeal Stuck Out in Our Minds, and we all know that. This is a little store that seemed to provide us with food one time. They did give us tripe one time. It was probably bad already. Tripe is the lining of a cow's stomach. Well, I've got to back up here, I've been distracted. Well, I remember one time when there was hardly anything left to eat. My father and I broke into this barn up the road and stole some beans that had been left on the barn floor. They had been there for many years. We threshed them out, and they were like little rocks, they were so hard. My mother could not bake them, so she boiled them. They had little things like worms that came out when they split. And I said to my father, they look like worms. He said, they are, but don't say anything. The other kids won't eat them. I'm going to go back to the tripe now. They did give us tripe one time. This was the store. Yes, they gave it to us. You bet it was bad. It wasn't anything to make it sell. It was probably bad already. Tripe is the lining of a cow's stomach. I told you that. What we had was pickled, and my mother fried it in bacon fat. That was bad enough. But you just described in detail what it was. One of her off moments, I guess. Anyway, it did not taste very good, and I would gag when I tried to eat it. Then she would force me. I would go outdoors, throw up, come back, eat more, go back outdoors again. That was how I had to eat that crap, and I'll never eat tripe again. They gave us some chocolate candy bars once, same store. Turns out they had worms in them. We got them free, and we ate them, but not the worms. The worms stayed in the peanuts, the chocolate was good. There was no welfare, we never got anything. My father would not have stood for that. We would eat rolled oats for days at a time, 3 meals a day. The oatmeal was boiled in the morning, though my mother never got the knack of doing it the same way twice. So it could be dry one morning, gooey the next. At noontime, we would fry up what was left over from breakfast with old bacon fat we got from Danny Sexton, who lived next door. Sometimes we would spread molasses or jelly on or something like that on it to make it more palatable. We had it a lot, but I never did know where it came from. As I mentioned, most of the time we did not have any credit at the store, yet we always seemed to have oatmeal. You'll have to read that yourself if you want to. This one's entitled, We Played Hard. We didn't have soft toys and things. Just that. Right?
Oh, yeah. Bring as much as you want. We just wanted you to cover those.
Okay. I'm right on schedule now. Just entitled, We Played Hard, and there's more to it than what I'll read. We kids threw everything at each other, and one way we would while away our time was with apple bites. We would whittle out a short stick, making it sharp on one end, and then place an apple on the tip. We could throw a long way with a great deal of accuracy, and we would get behind things for protection, but it did not always stop us from getting hurt. My cousin Jimmy and his brothers were fighting against me and Tommy one time, and we were hiding up behind a couple of wood piles. I threw an apple and hit Jimmy in the eye. Man, it must have hurt. It was all we could do to talk him out of going to our parents and telling. Well, things were going along quite well, and we got back into flinging apples again. I threw an apple and hit Jimmy in the other eye. There was no hope for me then. I got a whipping right there and then in front of everybody. Had it coming though, but how can that happen twice in a row? Okay?
Yeah.
Where would I be without her? I couldn't even stand here, especially couldn't read. I'd be reading the wrong thing. This is called the outhouse. Now, we all grew up, or a lot of us grew up with outhouses, maybe some of us still do. So it's the outhouse. I almost forgot about the outhouse. That was an ordeal sometime because in the winter, it was so cold. I'll tell you more about the slop jar later. That was mostly for my mother, though during the night I'm sure my father used it too. It was always full and so nasty, and as I got older, it was my problem to empty it, not in the outhouse, just outdoors somewhere, behind the house or closer in the winter when the snow was deep. Nobody cared as long as it wasn't in the house. It never was rinsed out. Who would want to lug water from my well for that? So I guess it stunk when I put it back in my bedroom because the outhouse was never pleasant. I think about the stories that are written by outhouse enthusiasts. How lovely, how you could think things over, how you looked at the catalog, and ordered when you got back into the house. Bull. Not all bull. This one, it's called School Days. After we get up in the morning on school days, my mother would clear a spot on the table, rip off 5 pieces of wax paper, lay the bread on them, and then spread a little devil ham mixed with mustard. There would be at least one ashtray on the table, and she would be making them with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth. I used to watch and try to pick the sandwich that did not get ashes on it. We had peanut butter sometimes, but it came in a can, and it was settled. I'm sure some of you remember that. As hard as you tried, you could never get the bottom stirred up real good, so when you got to the bottom, it was all hard. When the hens were laying, we could have egg salad. There were times I did not have any lunch. We just barely got up in time to meet the bus. My mother was never a morning person. Most days, we did not have time to get ready. We barely washed up, went months without brushing our teeth. We never had toothpaste. We dipped our toothbrush in a box of baking soda when we did brush. We did not just put some on it, but we actually dipped it into the same box that my mother used for cooking. We never brushed our teeth on a regular basis. If we got to school without something, we simply did not eat. There was nothing at school, only water from the other kids. We had no clothes. I mean it. No shoes, sneakers, or anything for her feet, and no proper shirts or pants. Probably my mother did not order them soon enough. Every year, we ordered our clothes from the Sears catalog. We would leave cash in the mailbox. The mail driver would get the money order. The next day, it would be sent along with the Sears order. Anyway, can you imagine how everyone would feel to be days late starting school, and all the kids would know why? I don't read the whole book, though I would. This one's kind of funny. And it's called I Thought I Had Killed Him. So this is not a person, okay? I didn't kill anybody. I don't think anybody in my family killed anybody. One time I was in the car, ran over a deer. I thought I had killed him, so I dragged him into the back seat of the car. I must have knocked him out because after I had driven for a while, the deer came alive. Well, he could not get up because his legs were kind of bent around the seat. But he sure was trying and making a lot of commotion. I drove the rest of the way home with the driver's door open. I expected to dive out at any time. I pulled into the yard. I stood in the yard for a few minutes to get my wind and calm down. I am right now. Got to go in the house as cool as possible. So as calmly as I could, first I went into the house and my father was sitting at the table. As calmly as I could, I asked if he wanted a deer. Yeah. Where is he? He thought he was up the road somewhere and we were going to go up and shoot it. It's nighttime. Well, I said, I got one in the car. But he's still alive. Can't put everything in here. You're blanking me, he said. We walked to the car and there was the deer trying to get up. Well, I'll be a son of a blank. I guess you have. He said, so he shut the door, went into the house, got his knife, went back to the car, opened the door and cut the deer's throat. Now, a lot of blood got on the floor of the car, but that was a common way of living to me, and I didn't think much about it at all. Cars were built stronger then. Didn't know of anyone who damaged their car by hitting a deer. Nowadays, a car can be totaled for hitting an animal. Now, they didn't pick out this one, but I kind of wanted to just finish up. If you'll give me a moment. This is entitled The Old Shed. And I wrote this just a month or so ago when Kathy was able to put this in. Recently, Amanda, my granddaughter, and her husband Chris went to Surry to see if anything was left of the old homestead. I was surprised that they found an old shed still on the property. I thought everything was removed after my brother sold all the land. The old shed was made of wood and covered on the sides with metal from old Humpty Dumpty potato chip cans. I believe that company is still in business. The cans were flattened and nailed on the shingles, like shingles, with the lettering facing on the inside. The floor was made out of small trees about 3 inches wide, and they would be laid together and then chainsawed between them to make them fit better. You can imagine how that would be. Anyway, my father was running that chainsaw between them, and it bucked back and hit him in the face. Took part of his nose off, hit his forehead, plus ruining his glasses. He was a mess, with blood everywhere. You can imagine how much blood there would be with a head wound. He drove himself to the hospital some 15 miles away. He didn't even go into the house to tell my mother. Said she would worry too much. After finding out that there was something left of the old homestead, the shed, it was burning in me to find out if it was the original one. So I went over to Surry, met the Bennetts, who bought the remaining 30 acres from my brother. Mr. Bennett demolished the house and all the buildings except the shed. He stored it enough to store some hand tools. Though it is in rough shape, he will use it for a while. The Bennetts are from Massachusetts and intend to move here permanently. It was a pleasure to meet them, and one of their greyhound dogs, Henry. They were more than glad to have me look the old shed over and let my mind go back some. Anyway, the shed was a blast from the past. You can see from the picture here. Brought an old shed. Not going to read anymore.
Or if you want to talk about some of the pictures, or if anybody has any questions, we can answer questions, and then if anybody wants to buy a book or have one of their books signed.
And we did self-publish this, so it's been going on for 5 or 6 years. So it didn't just, today I want to do something, she did it, so it was dragged out. Do you have any questions about how we did it, or what we had to go through to do it?
Or if anybody wants to you know, ask about questions, about the pictures or.
How do you go about self-publishing a book?
Well,
like that?
there you are, Kathy.
A lot of frustration with Word, with Microsoft Word, I can tell you that. Yeah, I did some research about and read some articles about people who publish their own books. Initially, you know, when I got some of the stories together, and you know, we kind of tossed them back and forth, and I'd say, you know, does this seem okay? And we'd kind of go back and forth. And I did submit excerpts to a few publishers, but you know, didn't get good response. And you know, then I read about authors who had to spend days sending their stuff to publishers, and I thought, oh, I don't know if I have the patience for that. So then I started looking into publishing, and it was really a great thing with Amazon because through CreateSpace, which is a division of Amazon, you can, as long as you've done the formatting, I mean, they'll print anything you want them to print. I wanted it to look like any book that you would pick up off the shelf. So did a bunch of research on that just to make all the formatting look the same. And I think we feel like this is kind of temporary. We'd like to get a publisher who would take over the book and promote it and you know, publish it. But right now, like I said, it is available on Kindle. All I had to do was get it in a format that looked right, and you can upload the file to Kindle. And with CreateSpace, which is a division which does they print the paperbacks. It's a pretty fast process, actually. You upload your file, and then within 24 hours they tell you it's okay. You can actually see it on this computer screen as it would look in book format, and decide, you know, does this look okay? Are the page numbers in the right places, and all that sort of thing. And then you say, good, go, yes, print it, and you order copies. So, and then of course other people can go online now with Amazon, just type in the Oatmeal Stories or Robert Stevens, and it comes up. So that was kind of exciting to have that available. And at first we did think, you know, only friends and family, but obviously more than just the people that we know have bought it. And so, you know, there were a few mixed reviews, and you know, some people were saying, well, it's not like Angela's Ashes, and I said, well, well, that guy was an English major.
And he's got a helicopter now, too.
But, you know, my husband said, don't read any more of those reviews. So, which I don't anymore. I can see those people. But, you know, I actually still have the goal of writing a children's story. I wanted it to be a series about the boy from Surry, Maine, and just put the cute stories like the apple fights and leave out maybe some of the other stuff that was a little bit gritty. So I think it's a fun project. I think it was nice to learn. There were things that even in my family, I read stories to my niece one day, way before it was published. You know, I had a collection, and she was laughing. She was 13. She was laughing and really intrigued by the stories, wanted me to keep reading. And I thought, wow, that's a good sign that you know, this is going to work. You know, because other people are interested in it. Different age groups were interested in it. Some older people that I knew who didn't know him, I said, tell me what you think. And they said, oh, this is amazing. You know, we grew up in that time period, but not that kind of family, not that kind of situation. So so I think that was kind of nice to know that it was something a little different that people hadn't read about.
No, another thing, if a publisher had taken it, they would have changed the way I talk.
It's true.
Why tell stories? Somebody else is going to tell it different. So this is kind of how I talk. And Kathy was able to keep it that way. Now, if the publisher gets hold of it, they probably will change it, and that's all right, because we still have this copy.
We have the first edition.
Did you ever think of narrating it and like doing an audiobook? Because the thing is, I heard you on the radio before I bought the book. So when I was reading the book, I was reading it in your voice. And I thought that really helped.
You're from away and you're starting to talk like me already? We've only been here since April. Look what we've done to him. I think if anybody's here for 6 months, they can't afford to have them go away again. I've heard that. Don't disclose anything you shouldn't.
That is a good, we have thought about that. And my daughter does professional photography and some video, so we definitely would like to do that. Have them just read through. That's actually a good project. Good winter project. Yes.
I'm assuming you went to the Old Surrey School. How far away did you live from that, and did you walk?
It was 3 miles, and they had a 4-door sedan that they picked us up in, so we had a ride. So I didn't walk uphill both ways.
So you were up the Toddy Pond Road, or?
No, Newbury Neck Road. You go into
Oh,
Surry,
yes.
before you go up over the hill to go to Blue Hill, you take a left and you
Yeah.
go down on that peninsula, which is called Newbury Neck.
You know where the tower is, the big radio tower?
Just beyond
Just
there,
below that.
a few hundred feet on the right.
Yes.
Where did you move when you left home?
I moved to a lot of places, but when I left home, I lived with an old lady within a couple of miles from my house. Her name was Lillian Collins, and looking back, and I don't think she probably needed any help, but evidently her family wanted somebody to stay with her. So I was 13, I turned 14 while I was there, and I graduated from grade school, 8th grade, that spring. That's in the book, that explanation. So I was in Surry, and then that summer after 8th grade, I moved away to work for a dairy, delivering milk. And I lived right there until about a week before high school started. And I lived with an aunt and uncle in Ellsworth. And then all through the years, stayed with different people, stayed with my uncle here for 1 year.
Is that in the book too,
Yes.
Yes,
after 8th grade?
yep, yeah.
Yeah, right up until he graduated, because he graduated from Ellsworth High School in '58.
It really doesn't take in anything after I was 17 or 18 maybe. It
So
just
for your
references back.
information about his
Yeah.
mom and dad, there's some information about, you know, when his mom and dad were dying and, you know, a
Have-
few things.
have you
after
read it?
Not yet.
Oh,
Can't
some at the
wait.
back.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I know you from growing up here in the Ellsworth area. I know that you and Kathy are very close, your family's very close-knit.
My sister, you mean?
Oh, me,
Oh,
yeah, me.
okay,
My
all right,
daughter.
go ahead.
So I know that your family was very large, you were very close. How did this book affect you, Kathy, as you read of the things, like, I know things that my parents went through. How did that affect you about your dad?
Well, I think it made me realize, you know, the kind of things that you go through and, you know, the way you're treated. I mean, even the stuff that he read, he didn't read any of the parts that he talks about the way his mother was or the way his father treated him. And I think it has a lot to do with your self-esteem. And so it really was insightful. I thought, wow, I really can imagine how difficult it was to go through some of those things. And when I used to hear this, I kind of coined the term the Oatmeal Stories. I actually wrote a paper and I was taking a course, an English course on writing, and I used that term. So I said, oh, my dad always told us stories about when he was growing up, and you know, we just thought, he just wants us to appreciate what we have, you know.
Not sure it worked.
But, so there were definitely things that I felt like I learned about his family and the emotional part of it that were really good. And, you know, I was reading some of it to my brothers, and we thought we all knew everything about his life growing up, but we didn't. And so I think it was a great experience. I think there's so much, well, even the family history. He had done a lot of research on our family history, going back to great-grandparents. And so I initially was going to incorporate some of that in the book, and there's a little bit in the back. But I didn't think that was as entertaining and interesting as some of the stories that you told.
It's starting to get to me now.
Probably should have seen a psychologist, but never did.
See, we never could afford one. We didn't know what they were then anyway.
So I think that's kind of the lesson too, because he always used to say to us, well, you know, it's ridiculous people being depressed all the time, you know. And so I guess that kind of gave me some insight about that too, and made me appreciate a little bit more about what he went through.
Now, Bob, did any of your brothers and sisters board in town to go to school?
No.
No. See, a lot of out-of-town kids had to back.
Yes, they did. They had to
You
figure out
know,
some way to get
yeah,
to high school.
And they called it working their way through high school, which a lot of kids didn't know, but the people that you boarded with, sometimes when you got home from school, it was your job to do the supper and the dishes and get everything done. And if you didn't have time to do your schoolwork, oh well,
Yeah, well, and he did that with, he stayed with, actually, it was my mother's aunt for a while.
I had
He
to
boarded
work
with her-
dishes
with
and
her.
clothes and things like
Yeah.
that, so I worked my board, though it doesn't pay for your work. Doesn't pay for your board, but when they
No.
were watching TV, having a good time, I was watching.
Yeah,
dishes.
you was the one doing the work.
And the water had to be like there too.
Oh, yeah.
Because those, so none of the kids from Surry there was no public transportation to high school, so if you went to high school in
No,
Ellsworth, you had to have a way.
from grammar school, you was on your own.
Yeah, that's true.
They didn't care if you went or not, it was up to,
Now, this girl is talking, she lost her mother when she was very young, and she lived down
I
below
was
me.
2.
Yeah, so her
So my
father
dad
brought
raised
up
me,
a big family all by herself, so
yeah.
not to be competitive, but she could write her own book, I'm sure.
But we had fun though, as kids, you know, playing together and doing stuff together. We had fun as kids. But, yeah, it was rough times.
Yeah. Did anybody, you,
We went through that same thing when I was growing up. The high school kids who lived out back, there's no bus transportation, or they lived in Orland or out round, and for them to do anything at school was, they couldn't do anything. And it was the same time as you going to school. And we had a succession of 2 or 3 young women who came to live with us, and that's what they did in exchange for living there.
Yeah.
They took
Done
care
all
of
the
things.
work.
And of course, there was us young kids, you know.
Yeah.
And then they could also do all the high school things, and too, that they couldn't have done if they lived out back. And we had a wonderful time with them, and they were friends forever. you know.
I never thought anything about that. If I was living in someone's home, I learned to fold the towels their way. I did
Yeah.
things that they wanted because it was their house. And I
Yeah.
still feel that way. You go to somebody's home, you do it their way.
Right.
And so I never, ever felt that I was doing more than I should. Never. And I was pretty grateful when I had.
you lived in probably four different places during
Yeah.
high school?
Yeah. lived in
And
my-
if we played sports in school, after school, that's like my sister and I, want to make sure you had running shoes on, because it's 12 miles to my house from Ellsworth. So, I mean, because we had no transportation, when you left the school ground in Ellsworth, you was running to get home.
I had a comment, in response to your saying someone negatively compared it to Angela's Ashley.
Oh,
When I read the
Yes, they
article,
did.
when I read the article, it reminded me of Angela's Ashes, because there was no self-pity and there was humor.
right,
That's fabulous.
yeah.
I'm getting the same in her word as well.
Well, some people thought this was
Oh, yeah,
a
it's
book with a continuing story. It's a book of stories, you know? And
It's not
there's
chronological.
no exaggerating anywhere. It's all
Yeah. So
definitely the truth.
I think it can be compared very nicely.
Thank you.
That's a compliment. I'm looking for my first helicopter now.
Me and my daughter are always joking about who's gonna play his role in the movie.
Well, have fun with it, right?
Did you have a question about that?
It's not a question, it's just a comment. When I read the book, it was, I thought what a gift he gave to you, because when my father was dying for 5 months in a nursing home, he started talking. And I wish he'd done that, because, you know, our childhood was difficult. Now I'm able to finish this, but I just think everyone could relate to it on some level, and I thought it was so brave. Yeah, and a gift.
Brave?
It was a gift.
It's brave to stand up here and read to you. Somebody, go ahead.
I'm from Blue Hill, and I'm your age. I don't know what month you were born.
I'm a Valentine, February 14th, 1940. You're not older than I am, are you? You don't look it, you clean up really well.
I'm younger, I was born in August. But all through my growing up years, I remember hearing about you, know, not about you, but it's just, I just knew you existed, and I never met you, never saw you or anything. And so I'm reading this article in the Ellsworth American, and I related to a lot of what was in there, especially the cat story, the kitten stand.
Yeah,
I just couldn't imagine anyone else went through that.
well, boys kind of go across it a little probably easier after we hunted and everything, but it bothered my sister a lot, still does.
It bothered me, and I couldn't fathom the reason why I was doing it. I didn't dare to go back across the road without doing it.
Yeah,
I
right.
had to drown in the brook.
People who haven't read it, they're talking about how they would, if they had a cat that had kittens, they would drown the kittens.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
They would
about.
take them down to the bay.
They did that all the time when we were growing up. They go down across the Verona Bridge, they drop them off.
Now, how would you have known about me or my family?
I don't know, well, I probably didn't when I was real young, but over the years, it's been a lot of years, you know.
No.
Just-
And his father was the constable in Surrey.
Yeah, that was kind of a bone of contention too. He didn't even make one friend.
I think I'd like to know what she heard about you.
Well, the statute of limitation has got you.
It wasn't anything that I heard, you know people in the next town. I was born in Blue Hill and still live there.
I was born in Blue Hill,
Was ya?
yeah.
I'm sure I'm gonna relate to many of the friends once I get the book.
Did you have something?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh.
So if anybody would like to buy a copy of the book, we have them here for $10, and he'd be happy to sign it for you. Some of you already got a book and you need it signed, so just come on up and have him do that for you. And there's still coffee and some little treats. My mom actually made some oatmeal muffins. And I make oatmeal cookies in the theme of oatmeal. So help yourself to that stuff. And Rooster Brothers supplies with some coffee.
No tripe in it.
No, sir. Thank you, every one of you for coming. That's really, really a lot of fun.